Not every friendship in Hollywood is born under the spotlight. Some relationships are formed in silence, grow over time, and are only truly revealed when tragedy strikes. For Billy Crystal and Rob Reiner, it was more than just friendship. It was a bond so deep, it needed no explanation. But on the night of December 14th, 2025, everything crumbled. A phone call, a trembling voice. And in those fleeting seconds, Billy Crystal's familiar world was torn apart. Rob Reiner and his wife were murdered in the very home that had once been the place of laughter, of memories, of moments never captured on film. Billy said nothing to the press. But just hours later, he broke the silence in a way that left Hollywood stunned. Not through tears, but through angry, painful, and haunting words. Words that reveal a dark side previously unknown to the public. This is not just a story about a death. This is a story about betrayal, about the fear of being buried, and about a secret that could change how we view Rob Reiner's entire legacy. Please like and share this video so more people can fully understand the story behind this tragedy. After the initial shock, the pain didn't disappear. It subsided, becoming heavier, more pronounced. As the first pieces of information were confirmed, Billy Crystal understood that this wasn't a fleeting nightmare. This was reality. A reality so cruel, it almost made him unable to stand. At that moment, Billy was at home with his wife, Janice. The phone rang incessantly until a close friend finally spoke. The voice on the other end trembled, hesitant, as if even the speaker couldn't believe what they were about to say. Just one short sentence, but enough to freeze everything. Rob Reiner and Michelle were dead. Billy repeated the words unconsciously, as a reflex against reality. He dropped the phone from his hand. Janice stood beside him, her face pale, understanding without explanation that something irreversible had just happened. The room fell silent. Only heavy breathing and a growing sense of emptiness remained. The first image that came to Billy's mind wasn't the police, nor the press. It was the house in Brentwood. Just months before, they had sat together, laughing and reminiscing about movies that had become history. A familiar warm space, now associated with two words: murder. When Los Angeles police sealed off the area, confirming that both Rob and Michelle were dead with multiple fatal stab wounds, Billy couldn't sit still any longer. He and Janice immediately drove to Brentwood. The familiar road that day suddenly felt strange, blocked by yellow tape, police cars, and cold, flashing lights. The moment Billy stepped out of the car, everyone present noticed the change in his face. The man once known for his smile and wit seemed to have aged decades overnight. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, each step slow and heavy, as if carrying an unnamed burden. He didn't say a word. Tears fell silently. Even without witnessing it, anyone could feel the pain tearing him apart from within. Standing before the gate of the house, Billy could barely move. He bowed his head, his hands trembling slightly, his gaze fixed on the space behind the fence, where the laughter of a family, of a friendship that lasted nearly half a century, had once echoed. The air was thick and heavy, as if all sound had been sucked away. Billy and Janice placed a bouquet of white flowers outside, without a farewell, without an announcement to the media. Only silence. A silence filled with pain, and also a sign that this was not the end of the story. Because right after that moment of seemingly complete collapse, Billy Crystal would do something no one expected. A decision that sent shockwaves through Hollywood and uncovered secrets that Rob Reiner had tried to keep hidden for years. After leaving his Brentwood home, Billy Crystal couldn't sleep. That night seemed endless. The pain didn't subside. It transformed into something else, more intense, more violent, and filled with rage. In his mind, old memories constantly clashed with a persistent question. Why did this happen? And more importantly, was this really just a random tragedy? Just hours after news of Rob Reiner and Michelle's deaths was confirmed, Billy Crystal made a decision that stunned many. He contacted Rolling Stone. Not to talk about his career, not to offer the usual farewells, but to say things that, in his opinion, could no longer remain buried in silence. In the dimly lit room, Billy sat down, his hands clasped tightly, his voice trembling but resolute. Pain and anger mingled, making each word he uttered carry an unusual weight. "This isn't a coincidence," he said. "Rob told me he's afraid, and he has reason to be afraid." For the first time, the public heard previously undisclosed details, an unfinished will, numerous silent revisions, private conversations Rob Reiner only dared share with his closest friend. According to Billy, Rob feared that a family member, one who had struggled with addiction and wrong choices, might cause the worst. Billy's voice choked as he spoke of it. He wasn't telling someone else's story, but rather carrying a burden he'd been forced to bear for years. Rob, according to him, had done everything to protect the rest of his family. Changed the will, tried to save the lost child, even turned his personal pain into art, hoping to bring that person back. As the conversation progressed, Billy's emotions were no longer contained. Anger was evident in every breath. "How can a father be betrayed in this way?" he said. "Rob loves his children unconditionally. And if that's what led to this outcome, it's a cruel truth to accept." Those words weren't a formal condemnation, but they were powerful enough to shake public opinion. For the first time, the possibility that this tragedy originated from within the family was openly raised, and with it, the image of Rob Reiner. The man behind the heartwarming stories on screen was suddenly shrouded in a never-before-seen shadow. When the interview ended, Billy Crystal left only one short, haunting statement. He would not let the truth be buried, and he would not forgive anyone who had destroyed the family he considered his own. Those words spread quickly, not only because of their painful impact, but because they opened a door no one had dared to touch before. And from that moment, the story was to no longer just a murder case. It became an earthquake, ready to sweep all of Hollywood into a whirlwind of suspicion, outrage, and controversy. Within hours of Billy Crystal's words being released, the atmosphere in Hollywood changed dramatically. The initial shock quickly gave way to a wave of widespread questioning. Questions that had once been silently held now emerged openly, relentlessly, and unavoidably. On social media, posts about Rob Reiner flooded in. People reposted memorable moments from his career, from films associated with childhoods to iconic lines. But intertwined with the grief was a growing outrage. The public was not only saddened by the loss of a filmmaker, but also haunted by the way he died. Many began to wonder, how could someone who had brought joy and comfort to millions of viewers have to end his life in such circumstances? And if what Billy Crystal is implying is true, then this is not just a murder case, but a family tragedy on a deeper, more brutal level. Forums, comment sections, and online debates quickly became divided. Some called for caution, emphasizing that there had been no official conclusion from the investigating authorities. But many others expressed anger and a feeling of betrayal, as if the image of a seemingly complete family had crumbled before their eyes. This outrage wasn't just directed at the unidentified perpetrator, but also at a larger question. Could a father's unconditional love and tolerance become a double-edged sword? Could silent sacrifices and efforts to salvage the situation be misinterpreted or exploited? The more people spoke out, the heavier the story became. Memorials now carried a deeper tone of sorrow and unease. Rob Reiner is no longer known simply as a talented artist, but as a man with private struggles never revealed. And that's what makes the public feel closer to him, but also more heartbroken. In this context, colleagues and friends in the film industry began sharing their own memories. Not flowery words, but small, very real stories. A stressful workday diffused by laughter, a timely word of encouragement, an unassuming act of kindness. All of this further highlights the bitter contrast between the man they once knew and the tragic end he suffered. As the wave of emotion continued to rise, one thing became clear. This story transcended the boundaries of a news report. It became a mirror reflecting the dark sides of family fame and secrets kept too long in silence. And to understand why this loss has affected so many people, we need to go back in time, back to where it all began. Back to the relationship that shaped a long chapter in cinematic history, and which is also key to understanding why Billy Crystal could not, and never would, consider Rob Reiner just a friend. To understand why Rob Reiner's passing stirred such strong emotions in Billy Crystal, we need to go back a long way, to a time when neither of them were household names in film history. Before their fame and glory, a rare connection existed between them. They first met in the early 1970s, in the very ordinary setting of a television studio. At that time, Billy Crystal was a young actor seeking his place, while Rob Reiner was just beginning to gain attention. Neither of them could have imagined that this seemingly chance encounter would lead to nearly half a century of close association. The connection developed faster than they anticipated. Not because of ambition or professional gain, but because they saw life in a strangely similar way. They shared the same sense of humor, pondered the same loneliness, and both believed that art only truly has value when it touches the very human side of the audience. From colleagues, they became friends. From friends, they became family. During their early years in Los Angeles, Billy and Rob shared something Hollywood rarely allows: time. Simple dinner dates, late-night conversations, stories not about contracts or fame, but about the fear of failure, uncertainty about the future, and the desire to do something truly meaningful. As Rob Reiner transitioned into directing, Billy Crystal was not only an actor but also their first listener. Many ideas were tested in the living room. Many characters were formed from their very real conversations. Some of the lines on screen actually originated from their conversations, unscripted and uncalculated. The culmination of this bond was evident in a project where both understood that failure could jeopardize not only their careers but also their friendship. They hesitated. They were afraid. But in the end, they chose to trust each other. And that decision marked an indelible milestone in film history. Remarkably, even after their success, their relationship remained unchanged. There was no distance because of fame, no apprehension because of power. They continued to tease each other, engage in heated debates about scripts, and were always the first to call each other when there was good news or when life became too difficult. Billy Crystal once said that in a highly competitive and lonely industry, Rob Reiner was one of the rare people who made him feel like he wasn't fighting alone. Conversely, for Rob, Billy was not just a partner, but a source of emotional support during the most difficult periods of his life. Therefore, when tragedy struck, Billy lost not just a friend. He lost someone who had been with him through almost his entire journey of growth, in his career and in his life. A loss that cannot be measured by mere condolences or brief eulogies. And perhaps that is the deepest reason Billy Crystal chose to speak out, not to create controversy, but to protect the memory, the truth, and the image of the person he considered a part of himself. For Billy Crystal, the Brentwood house was never just an address. For decades, it was a place he could walk into without an appointment. A place without roles, without cameras, without audiences. Just friends, family, and the very real moments that Hollywood rarely reveals. In Billy's memory, that house was always associated with quiet afternoons, simple dinners prepared by Michelle, and conversations that lasted late into the night. Sometimes they talked about scripts, sometimes just about the little things, age, children, the weariness after years of work. That space gave them a sense of security, a place where they could shed all their outer layers. Therefore, standing before the sealed gate, Billy wasn't just facing the scene of a crime. He was seeing a part of his life erased. Every corner, every window evoked memories that could never be relived. The place that once echoed with laughter now stands as a silent witness to an inexplicable tragedy. This contrast intensifies the pain. A space that once symbolized stability, family, and shelter is now associated with violence and loss. For Billy, this was not only shocking, but also shattered his deep-seated belief that there are places in the world that will forever remain untouched by darkness. In the days that followed, while the press repeatedly referred to the house as a crime scene, Billy remembered it as a home. Two names, two completely opposite meanings coexisting in one place. And it was this contradiction that made him unable to accept the story being reduced to a few dry news headlines. The Brentwood house, in a way, became a symbol of this entire tragedy. Not only because of what happened inside, but because it shows the fragile boundary between happiness and ruin. A boundary that even those who seem to have it all, fame, family, career, cannot control. For Billy Crystal, that loss doesn't stop at the person. It spills over into space, into memory, into the sense of belonging. And when a place once considered the safest no longer holds its original meaning, the pain left behind is not just grief, but a lasting emptiness. It is from that void that a big question gradually forms. Not just for Billy, but for everyone following this story. What, ultimately, did Rob Reiner leave behind? Not just films, but a spiritual legacy, viewed in a completely different light. After everything that has happened, what remains is not just an ongoing investigation or unanswered questions. What remains, more clearly than ever, is the void left by Rob Reiner. A void that cannot be filled by news, speculation, or any explanation. Rob Reiner dedicated his life to telling stories about people, about friendship, love, growth, and the very real cracks in each person's life. Ironically, his own life, in its final years, became a story no one wanted to tell. A story that forces those left behind to confront the truth that even those who bring light to others can live in their own dark corners. For Billy Crystal, this loss was never just the pain of a friend passing away. It marks the end of a shared journey spanning nearly half a century. A journey where two men grew up together, failed together, succeeded together, and left an irreplaceable mark on film history. Billy's decision to speak out, ultimately, wasn't to stir up controversy, but to protect the memory, honor, and truth that he believed Rob deserved to be preserved. Perhaps Rob Reiner's greatest legacy lies not only in his classic films. It lies in the way he lived, the way he loved, and the way he fought, sometimes in silence, for those he cared about. And it is this that makes his passing so painful, but also makes him remembered as a complete human being, not just a symbol. This story will be, retold, analyzed, and debated. But above all, perhaps the most important thing is not to let Rob Reiner be remembered only for his tragic ending, but for the values he left behind throughout his life, on screen and in real life. If you feel the depth of this story, please like and share the video so that more people can look back at a legacy in a more complete way. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue following these in-depth, slow, and responsible analyses.